All right, welcome back to Blurry Creatures. We are excited today. Doug, we started our podcast talking about ancient stuff with you back in the day when we were just talking on Zoom, and now we're here live in the flesh in the studio. Welcome, Doug Van Dorn. It feels exciting to kind of have these long friendships with some of the original guests on our show, and we're actually here in the blurry basement. How does it feel?
And it's a surreal feeling, surrounded by everything I grew up with.
Yeah. What were you doing in the 80s, Doug?
I was going to high school and junior high.
Oh, I think that was the time to be alive.
Was like I was at the perfect point in life.
Did you have a mullet
there.
and a jean jacket?
I had no mullet.
Did you have a Trans Am?
I did. I had a 60 Impala.
Okay.
Let's go. I love that. That's fantastic. Well, Doug, it's been fun. It's
yeah.
You start like Nate was saying. You started with us real early on. Like soon we got into biblical giants. Went from Bigfoot into the sort of the biblical giant space. Of course, you have an amazing book. People still, is still really one of the major books in this space that people talk about and return to when we're talking about giants in the Old Testament. We've done a number of episodes with you. It's been fun. Everything from The Rings of Revelation, which is your latest book, to Wandering Stars.
Demons. Yeah. We did demonology a bunch with. We did.
Episode 100.
Yeah.
The blurriest
100.
creature. The Prince of Darkness. We did one on Satan.
Yeah.
But today we are going to talk about the Chaos Dragon. We're going to talk about Leviathan. This is Blurry Creatures, and while that's a wide lane for us, often as in. Blurry Creatures of the Bible. We did this with you at BlurryCon.
Yeah.
I believe the first BlurryCon. Yeah. We talked about all the blurry creatures of the Bible. And one that pops up and people talk about, whether it be in the context of believing there's a dinosaur or it's allegory, regardless, we have not addressed or talked about the Chaos Dragon, the Chaos
One of the things
monster.
we find is it's usually all the above, Doug. There's usually not one easy answer to any of these things.
You just read my mind, buddy.
Okay, let's go. So where do we start with this?
All right. So like this is going to go some wild places I don't think you're expecting.
This is the place for it, Doug. Yeah.
So,
as you know.
Why don't we just start tame, at least for like kind of the evangelical Christian sort of crowd, which is really just Leviathan as a dinosaur. Okay. Right. So I think this is what a lot of people think. If you go and read the scholarship, it comes from Job chapter 41. That's the place he's the best known. And you go in and read the scholarship and they're like, well, this is probably just a crocodile or something like that.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense to me whatsoever. So it's worth reading a little bit of it. Job 41 verse 1, can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? It's sort of like Bilbo meeting Smaug, right? Yeah. Like when you read the whole thing here, he's got these like tight scales. He's breathing fire out of his nose. And the thing about this, to me, that's the wildest is that it's coming in a list of animals that everybody believes are real animals until you get to Behemoth, which is the guy right before this. And then you get to Leviathan, who's kind of like the apex of the whole thing. So on one level, you have this list of creatures that end in something that main scholars are like, well, it couldn't possibly be a dragon. Right. So it's got to be something we're familiar with. Or you just have people go, well, it's sort of allegorical. It's exactly the way you started the show. And so to me, I personally think that there's possibly validity. Like I'm not going to die on a hill for it, that this could be referencing some sort of sea creature.
Yeah.
Just like I think Behemoth could be referencing some sort of dinosaur. Like I don't personally have a problem that dinosaurs walked with men.
Yeah.
And you guys have talked to people that have, talked about the dinosaur footprints with the human footprints down in Texas. Have you ever heard the story of Makila Mbumbo?
Is that like the Congo?
Yeah,
dinosaur?
the Congo dinosaur.
Do you know it well? Tell it.
I don't know it very well. It's been many years and I couldn't find the tape to go listen to. But back in the 80s, I heard this tape of this guy who went down with a crew to the Congo, and they had heard about Makilimabombo. He who stops the flow of rivers.
Yeah.
That's what his name means. And so then the story goes that they actually saw him, and somebody took a picture, but the camera, the film didn't work, or it was blurry or whatever,
Of course. I think, quick question to start this off. Is Satan Leviathan, or is Leviathan its own thing?
That's the $1 million question. So, like, on one level, you have that he is, it's possibly dinosaur thing. Okay. That, to me, that's interesting, but it's not the most interesting thing. The second thing that Leviathan is usually talked about is some sort of chaos monster. And so he's a metaphorical representative of chaos. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but if you know your Greek pantheon of gods, and
I know my Greek, though.
You go back to Zeus, and then you find out he had a father,
Right.
Kronos, and then you find out he had a father, Uranos, which means heaven.
Yeah.
Well, there's only a couple more layers back, and then you get to the ultimate first cause in Greek mythology, and it's chaos. That's what they call it. It's a god called Chaos. Now, Chaos gives birth to all these kind of primordial deities. One of them is Oceanus, and Oceanus might come up again later in our discussion. A lot of people think of him as like a river god or a sea god, but there's reasons to think that he might actually represent the ultimate form of chaos, which started off all Greek thinking.
Yeah.
Which is like, so we're right around what Leviathan would be when you start. As soon as you say chaos, the chaos monster, and if chaos is the first god, like there's something going on there.
Well, it reminds me of like the Enuma Elish, right? We've talked about sort of the Sumerian creation story where in that pantheon, the serpent is the creator god, right? You sort of have this
Luke's favorite animal.
return.
Just loves the snake.
Oh, dude, yes. I'm a snack. No, but I wanted to go back to what you said real quick because I think this is an interesting idea that as we start in Job 38. We've got a long list of animals, and I can give you a few here just because it's interesting. The lioness, the raven. We've got, and we get into 39, we have the doe, the bear. We have a wild donkey. We have an ostrich, a horse, a hawk, and you kind of run through the pantheon of these animals, and then it ends up with Behemoth and Leviathan, which is interesting, right? At the very least, that like,
why would you put
creatures?
fake creatures that don't have any reality right after a list of well-known creatures that do?
Yeah,
I don't understand. That makes no sense to me.
So one thing I think we do here, though, is we kind of combine a lot of the strange other paranormal ideas that happen along with trying to explore some of the reality of some of these creatures. Like, as we've asked so many people about what are your thoughts on Bigfoot, the wide variety of answers are bizarre, and you have to have sort of a prerequisite knowledge to even entertain some of the other ideas. He's an animal. Okay, that's basic. That was the first year of Blurry Creatures.
Right.
Yeah, it's some remnant animal.
Right.
And then 5 years in, we hear stories of like, it's a rental suit. And you're like, okay, like in order to entertain some of these ideas about maybe these creatures like Leviathan, you have to kind of open your mind up to the possibility that all things could be happening at once. It could be a spirit, it could be an elemental spirit, and a dragon, and some sort of other paranormal thing all at the same time. And I think that's why Blurry Creatures is such a space to explore these ideas, because as our listeners have come along the road with us and opened their minds to the possibilities of these creatures, what then, with that in mind, can we explore like some of the weirder possibilities of Leviathan? Okay.
Yeah. So first place I think you should start, biblically speaking, would be Revelation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course,
so Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, which is actually the very center of the literary structure of the book, talks about the devil and Satan And then it calls him a serpent and the dragon. So he's got 4 titles there.
Yeah.
And then in chapter 20, it repeats it in verse 2 with these same exact 4 titles. And the only 2 places that you ever see that are in those 2 verses. So Satan, the devil, the serpent, and the dragon are all identified as the same thing in those verses. So the serpent, pretty easy. That takes you back to Genesis chapter 3. But what is the root of taking you to the dragon? Where would he get that idea from?
Job 40 would be
maybe, but there's other places that you can go to as well. So here's kind of, this is a key verse that people need to know about with regard to Leviathan. So this is Isaiah 27, verse 1. And it says, "In that day, the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent." And in the Greek, the Leviathan, which in Hebrew, that's just that's Levitan. I mean, that's what the Hebrew word is. But in the Greek, it's Dracon. And that's the same word that John is using in Revelation. So it says, it's a prophecy of sometime in the future to Isaiah. "In that day, the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that's in the sea." And I think, and I'm not the only one, that is actually the root of where John is getting his connection to Satan with the dragon.
Ever wonder why we can't find Bigfoot? Maybe he switched to Mint Mobile. He's got unlimited talk, text, and web for $15 a month. He doesn't need to hide in the woods waiting for better cell reception. He's streaming. And maybe he's talking to FaceTime with Mothman. What do you think, Luke?
Well, yeah, with the service that Mint Mobile provides, he would be FaceTiming with Mothman. And if you want to have great service at a low price, Mint Mobile is offering unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. That's the best deal of the year. And maybe the only holiday gift you can give to the cryptid in your life.
That's right. You can get 3, 6, or 12-month unlimited plans for $15 a month. All Mint Mobile plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk, text, and web on the nation's largest 5G network. And you can bring your current phone number over to Mint Mobile, and there's no contracts.
We use Mint Mobile, and you should too. The service is fantastic. Dr. Judd Burton, we even find him out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. We connect with unbelievable clarity so we can hear every dulcet tone of that guy's voice.
That's right. Back in the 80s when your wireless service wasn't very good, this service is on the best network, and it's the best you can. It's crisp and clear, and you could be saving a lot with Mint Mobile.
So this year, don't get your favorite person Bigfoot socks. We get them a better gift. Premium wireless for $15 a month. Shop unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/blurry. That's mintmobile.com/blurry. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required, $15 a month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
So you think there's some sort of actual dragon creature that might have existed that's associated with the sea? Or, Doug, and this is where I'm at with our podcast a lot of times when we have explanations, is could Satan be astral projecting into these different creatures and living in them for a time? Because I think that's what happens in the garden, personally. Like, did Satan take over the body of a snake? Like demons take over our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't they rent sort of the rental idea?
Yeah, that's a weird idea. Like, because Satan, he enters into Judas, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? And so I don't, we've talked many times about how I don't think Satan is a demon. He's a fallen angel, so he has a body. So what does it mean for him to enter it? Well, I guess maybe I never thought about some sort of astral projection into him.
Well, if Eden was protected and they couldn't get in,
Yeah.
maybe he could get into a snake, take over his body, get in, and that's where you get this whole talking serpent.
Yeah.
And then the rationalist will say, "Oh, it's all metaphor. That didn't happen." And then the spiritualist is like, "Well, yeah, it was a talking snake." But like a blurry version would be like, it was a possessed snake, and that's how, kind of combining all these things.
Well, Blurry would say maybe.
Maybe.
I'm not saying that's what
but
it is.
like people who are here could understand how that's possible.
Yeah. No, I don't think that that's not possible. I tend to take Mike Heiser's view of what the serpent is, which is that it's not a talking snake, but it's a watcher. And the Watchers are
reptilian
described
looking-
as reptilian.
Serpentine.
Yeah, serpentine.
Which is
And
also
so-
on the table,
yeah.
but I think that's a better realm
Yeah.
to have the discussion in.
Yeah, I mean, they're both plausible to me. But it makes more sense to me, I guess, to think, except for the one thing about it is the Balaam story with the donkey. Like, what's a donkey talking for? So, I mean, I guess I have it in my worldview that a snake could talk if something happened.
Right.
But to me, it just makes more sense that the Nahash, that serpent, is actually a watcher, who's an angelic being who actually talks.
Yeah.
And like we do.
Well,
Yeah.
because we've interviewed people in the astral projection, lucid dreaming space who will take over an animal.
Yeah, yeah.
They'll say, I was flying as an eagle and I was seeing through the
It's like
eagle's
Game
eye.
of Thrones,
Yeah,
right? It's like Bran and the Raven.
So if you're like, is Satan's a seraphim, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Technically, is he that
Well,
class of
seraphim is
angel?
that's just a word that tells you a function of what it does. So it's a guardian.
Okay. So, I mean, if he gets bored, project into some animal, do something. If he's trapped
Yeah.
here, right? Like what?
Yeah.
I just want to bring that part into discussion as to why maybe the ancients would refer to him as a dragon and
Well,
a
what
serpent.
about this though? I mean, you're
You
probably
know.
gonna get. I don't want to skip ahead, Doug, but like we know that based on the works of Jesus, and I'm sure you'll get to this, but like when the demoniac they cast the demons out, and the pigs go into the water. Water is a place of chaos.
Right.
The demons in that cosmology, the ancient Hebrew, the demons lived. Their place of abode was chaos. So then, sort of from that understanding, then the king of chaos would be this chaos dragon, right? This formidable
Right.
beast from the sea, right?
Yeah.
In understanding the way that they had that worldview. So I don't want to. I'm sure you'll probably get to some of that.
I mean,
but
we could talk about that. I wasn't thinking about it, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating because the whole sea idea is really you have to add into your mind there what Sheol is,
right.
and Sheol is the Hebrew equivalent of Hades, and so it's this underwater realm that seems to be surrounded by water itself. And then it's a dry land that you go to, and it's got all these compartments and places that you go, just like any country would. And but there's a guardian of that who's swimming around outside of Hades, who is Leviathan. That's really, I think, the picture of it. I don't know if you've read Brian Godawa's book on. I think it's his Noah book. No, it's his Jesus book, Jesus Triumphant, his 7th book in the Chronicles of the Nephilim. He has Jesus when he walks on the water. He's actually riding the back of the Leviathan. He's standing on, like he's tamed the Leviathan, and so he's riding him. And that's the whole idea of Jesus is mastering the storm,
Right.
and he's mastering the gods who are the chaos gods.
chaos.
So for those like listening for the first time, Sheol is the Hebrew version. Hades
Of
is the
Hades.
Greek version.
Yeah, Greek is
And that's like the underworld inside the earth.
Right.
So there could be
Yeah.
some sort of hollow earth idea connected
Could
to
be. I mean, yeah, because at very least conceptually, that's exactly what it is. Whether or not they thought about it more literally, I don't have a problem if they did.
Which I like because it's kind of a combination of physical, a place inside the earth,
Yeah.
but also like a spiritual prison. So there's this supernatural element to it as well. So that these two things can combine a lot. And that's where I think the discussions happen a lot here is it's not just one thing, it's both. Like you've got these creatures that have abilities to disappear or reappear or move from mess with time. How is that possible? We don't understand that. We can't do that as humans. So we rationalize it away. So yeah, I guess the chaos, is it that the water itself is there's some sort of a law where it has a territorial, like it has ownership of the waters?
Well, it's more like the abyss, right? This idea of this unbottomless thing that they couldn't understand, I imagine, right?
Certainly, that's all. I mean, all these things are part of it.
We've taken it on a bit of a side, but I want to get back to Revelation 9 and 20. John uses the same word that we find in the Old Testament in Hebrew, which is the Greek word drakon, which is the Hebrew. The Hebrew before that means is Leviathan, as we say in English. But so what? Where do we go from there? So
So in the story, why is he brought up in the story? That's a question you need to ask. It's because there's a war that's taking place, and so in chapter 12, that war is between Michael killing the dragon, essentially. Okay, but the weird thing is that this is not the only place that we find this story. You find it in other versions with Baal killing Lotan. And Lotan is just that's the Canaanite equivalent of Leviathan. The words mean the same thing. In Babylon, Marduk slays Tiamat. Tiamat is also kind of the chaos monster. That word is actually related to a word in Genesis 1:2, the Tehom, the deep. So here you have another god who's slaying some sort of sea creature in the deep. You actually find it in India with the god Indra, who slays Vrita. And Vrita means encompassing. Now that will come back when we get into the places that you guys haven't even thought about before with this. You have it in Scandinavia with Thor, who kills a Yogermander. And if you know who Yogermander is, he's the serpent that encircles the world tree. And he's an Ouroboros figure. You guys know what an Ouroboros is?
Yeah.
So this is kind of a move, like my hinge into where I really want to
see
take
that
this
image in a lot of New Age stuff.
Seeing it up there where the Ouroboros is an idea of a serpent or a dragon who eats its tail. And so it makes a circle, and then it's got a head, and it's got its own tail in its mouth.
And the meaning of that is?
Okay, so the meaning of Ouroboros comes from two words. Oreos is of the tail, and boros is to devour. So Ouroboros is literally a tail eater. That's what the word means.
You know, sometimes on this podcast, Luke, the blurry creatures hide right in your backyard, just like one of some of those unwanted subscriptions. They're hiding right in your bill, and you can't see them. That's where Rocket Money comes in.
And Rocket Money has been incredible. Actually, I talk about this off air, but Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and helps you lower bills so you can grow your savings. It's been pretty incredible for me. You get an email every time that you have a big transaction. And you can see all your spending right in front of you. So if you have these unwanted subscriptions or things you don't know you're paying for, or sometimes even double paying, it alerts you and it'll cancel it for you. And in fact, this month, unbeknownst to me, Rocket Money actually lowered my internet bill even farther than it was before without me even prompting it. I have a premium subscription. Yeah, I really can't recommend it more highly than I do. And I would say this too, Nate. I would say that Rocket Money's probably saved me more than $1,000 this year.
And if you want to see all your subscriptions in one place, including the ones you forgot about or can't see that are hiding, Rocket Money finds them and gives you a dashboard with a clear view of all your expenses across all your accounts, and helps you have a personalized budget to keep your spending on track, which I think a lot of us these days, with all the things we're doing, places we're going, and the content that we're subscribed to, Rocket Money alerts you if the bills increase or if there's unusual spending on your account.
Rocket Money has saved users like us over $2.5 billion, including over $880 million in canceled subscriptions alone. Their 10 million members save up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/blurry today. That's rocketmoney.com/blurry. What is that, Nate?
rocketmoney.com/blurry.
Now, what's so weird about that is that the word Leviathan is a combination of two words. So you got the word Levi or Levi, which means to be joined to, and the word Tan or Tanin, which is a dragon. So it's a dragon joined to itself. It's an Ouroboros. That's what the word actually literally means. And so it can mean a twisting one. It can mean wreath-like. It can mean circular. That's what, and when you get into discussions with Leviathan, this is where people don't go. Okay. And yet I think this is exactly where they should go. Yeah. Because that's what the meaning of the word is, right? So what in the world could that be the significance of a creature that is identified as an Ouroboros that goes beyond just chaos? Like there's some kind of symbology going on there.
Right.
Okay. Everybody's seen the goat head, right? The upside down pentagram. And that this is a symbol of Satan. The Church of Satan actually uses this. Okay. So it's often drawn as a picture of a Baphomet, and you'll notice that there's 5 letters that are around it in the picture there on the left. And those letters spell out Leviathan. Leviathan. And so the question becomes, well, why in the world would they do that? And this gets into some really weird stuff that I think is super fascinating, but it's also kind of hard to wrap your mind around. Okay, so we need to move. I'll try and move as slow as you want so that we can make this understandable to people if they've never heard it before. And we'll start with this picture of a pentagram. How many sides does a pentagram have? 5. It has 5 sides. Okay, and so it's circumscribed by a circle. So then what you need to do, and I get this from the work of David Flynn, who passed away back in 2012. The dude was an absolute genius, and he did a lot of work on this, and he just dove into like the esoteric mind and how those particular kinds of people thought about things like Leviathan. And I think he was on the money in terms of what this thing is representing. So a circle is made of 360 degrees, okay? And if you take the fact that there's 5 angles, because it's got 5 points, so you've got 5 inner angles, those are all coming out at 72-degree angles. When you multiply 5 by 72, you get the number 25,920. Okay, so what would be significant about that? So now you have to understand that there's something that God built into the universe that is called a great year. So I think you guys have probably talked a little bit about the great year before. So it may not be completely new to people, but it might be to some people. So we have a solar year, right? A solar year is 365 days. That's how long it takes for the Earth to go around the sun in one cycle and return to the same place that it was. And you measure that according to the way that the constellations rise over the course of the year. So there's 12 constellations. There's something called a great year, which is 25,920 solar years, which just so happens to be the exact same number as the pentagram circumscribed by a triangle when you multiply the 360 by the 72.
And the great year, is that the precession of the zodiac?
That's the precession of the equinoxes.
Oh, the equinox.
Okay, so the Earth is on a tilt. It's on an angle. I think it's like, it varies over the course of the great year. But right now it's like 22.5-degree angle. So it's not perfectly vertical.
Right.
Right. And that's the key. If it was perfectly vertical, you wouldn't really be able to have life on Earth. Because it's tilted, it creates seasons. So that we can have winter and then you have summer. Right. Because of the way that the Earth is revolving around the sun over the course of the solar year. So because it's tilted, that means that if you take the vertical axis of the Earth and you move it around one time to the point where it goes back to where it was, that takes 25,920 years.
Wow.
To do that. Now it gets really weird because 1 degree of that movement is 72 years.
Which is the angles?
Which is the angles in the pentagram. Okay? And then the circle, so that's how long it takes it to go around fully, that's your 360 degrees. So the pentagram being circumscribed, I'm not going to say it again. Circumscribed by the circle is a representation of the great year. And they associate that with Leviathan.
So what's going on? We're going to unpack this because that's, again, to recap, we have a pentagram surrounded by a circle with the words Leviathan on each point of the pentagram. And then within that, we can take the degrees of the pentagram and multiply them, and they end up at this number, which is the exact same as the
great year.
The great year.
Yeah, the precession.
Also celestial year, but it's a, okay.
Okay, so that's step one. You got to be able to understand that there's some kind of a connection going on that at least Satanists and occultists and, people in esoteric thought throughout the ages have seen this, and they're representing it. Now, I think what's going on in the inversion, in putting it upside down, whenever you do something like that, you're inverting it.
Yeah.
And so you're telling the opposite story. So if you were to have it right side up, like Rush does, that would be telling it the right way. You know, because, I mean, Rush, the band Rush, if you look at their, 2112 album, is a circle with a pentagram, but it's right side up. It's not upside down. So the Satanists are taking that and they're flipping it upside down and they put the Baphomet in it. Well, what's the symbology of that? Well, I think that the symbology is that you are usurping the one who created it with some fallen creature that you're now worshiping, who's now somehow over what this is a representation of is all of time effectively. 26,000 years that's a long time. It's more than all of our recorded human history that we have. I mean, Göbekli Tepe and those complexes that are around there are the oldest structures that we know of. And those only go back half that time.
Right. Like maybe 12,000 ish plus years. Yeah.
So this would be a way of representing that there's some other entity in charge of all things.
Right, to these people, right?
To Satanists.
Again, it's I think this is what we kind of talked about at the top, right? It's the usurping of the creation story. The Nemo Elish with the serpent is the creator god. It's the usurping of all of the pantheons, the type of the Greeks, and it's putting, it's Baal putting himself at the top of the pantheon, right? It's
I forgot to tell you this, because the Baal thing is a great reference, because in every one of those stories, except for Michael and the dragon, you have the Baal, you have the India god, you have Thor, you have Zeus killing, I forget who he kills, but he kills a dragon as well. Every one of those is a storm god.
Yes.
And a lightning god. Every one of them. So why would that be? Okay, so somehow this storm god is, and we did a whole show on how I identify Satan with Baal, with Zeus, as they're the same entity. And so there's your connection then to what's going on, I think, with the Church of Satan putting the Baphomet in there, is that it's Lucifer who has somehow taken over and usurped. So was he given some sort of a role in the beginning of time over, like, we'll get into this too, our galaxy? Like he was supposed to be in charge of it or something? And then maybe he fell from that. He decided he wanted to take all glory to himself, or whatever the case may be. Maybe. Yeah. But whatever the case is, he's taking that worship that belongs to the one who created these things, and he's bringing it to himself.
Interesting too, in all the storm god stories, I think worth pointing out is each of those epics for those particular religions, for example, have the storm god overthrowing or slaying, when either way.
The chaos monster.
That, but also their father.
Their father too, yeah.
So you have this sort of wishful thinking on the behalf of the storm god of overthrowing their father, which is, I think, is very fascinating, right? In order to usurp that power.
If we do another show today, we'll get into that with the transfiguration, like directly into that. So
fantastic. All right, so where are we going? This is already mega fascinating.
All right, so I think I want to do this. I want to take us back to the Serpent Mound stuff. Yeah. So Judd and I are nearing the completion of this book that we've been talking about with you for a couple of years. Yeah. So we're excited about that. It hasn't been published yet, and it won't be by the time this comes out. We're hoping later, maybe December of this year. Yeah. But it just depends on when we get the manuscript to them.
Right. If you haven't listened to the shows, we did an episode on the documentary that you did on Gilgal Raphaim.
That's right, with Rudy.
Which is the Wheel of the Giants. You guys discovered a serpent mound in Israel. This is sort of the backstory for all that. And then you and Dr. Jed Burton, also a great friend of the show, frequent guest here, are writing a book on this ancient Wheel of Giants in the Holy Land that's also connected with the Serpent Mound. That's just sort of the requisite if you're joining us for the first time with Doug here. I'm going to go back and listen to his episodes number 1, but this is in reference to that book and also this story that we've covered on the show.
Yeah. So in some ways, what I'm doing today with Leviathan is kind of it's my latest thinkings of several of the shows that we've done in the past, actually. Okay. So the show on Satan, the show on the Serpent Mound, and probably some of the other ones as well.
Yeah. The Wandering Stars.
Yeah. Like, when you think about these things really deeply, And then you start trying to explore something like we have tried to do with this weird feature in Israel. You can't help but kind of bring these things together and go, I wonder if there's any significance to this. So it would be helpful to just go back and talk for a minute about the Gilgal Rephaim and the Serpent Mound. Yeah. So this is located in southern Bashan in Israel, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And everybody knows about the Gilgal Rephaim. It means the wheel of the giants. It's a modern name. It's not something that we know was ancient, but they named it that because this is the territory that Og, that Moses killed. He was over that area.
King Og of Bashan.
Yeah. Just right north of that wheel, just a tenth of a mile, is this weird feature that I discovered on Google Earth back 15 years ago or something now, because I had read Mike Heiser talking about how Bashan means a serpent. And I had been listening to all of David Flynn's videos on YouTube, where in what some of those videos, he was over on Google Earth looking at stuff in Peru and finding these weird things. And so I just went over to this part of the world, and I said, I wonder if you could find anything. And I mean, my mind, I instantly recognized this. I'm like, that's a serpent mound. And I called Judd up. I didn't know him from Adam, and we talked about it. And he goes, yeah, like, how have I never seen this before? I'm like, how's anybody ever seen this before? Like, it's so obvious. You can make it out. When we took that picture, that happened to be right at sunset on a beautiful sunny night, and so you can see the shadow of it. It's like it's the perfect picture, so you can see the undulating gyration of this serpent, and the wheel is literally just right off the screen to the right. You could drive a golf ball from the wheel over to the Serpent Mound. It's that close. And it also happens to be exactly on the exact 0 degree longitude of the top of Mount Hermon.
Wow.
Which is, I don't know, 15, 20 miles straight to the north.
So it's right on line with...
It's dead on line. You couldn't find a place anywhere in the entire globe to be more perfect than where that is.
Yeah.
So, really what our book is about is kind of a 2-part book where we're trying to figure out what could be the significance. Could this even be a real thing? And then we kind of tell the story of the dragon from a biblical point of view. So what I want to do is help people just to see kind of maybe one chapter in that book as kind of a teaser for it, which is that you find this motif of a serpent mound. So serpent mounds are found all over. They're all over in North America. They're all over in Britain. And there were stories that there were serpent mounds in other parts of the world as well. And there was, when I started investigating those particular things, I found some 18th and 19th century writers that were talking about serpent temple complexes, but they described them in terms of acres. So they talked about dragons that were the size of acres. And I don't, call me crazy, but I would, if I was going to measure a dragon, I would do it in feet or yards or meters. I wouldn't do it in acres.
Right.
And so what these people suggested is that they're not actually describing animals, they're describing temples. And there was one that they called the Dragon of Damascus that was a 50-acre temple somewhere in Damascus that nobody's ever found a dragon or a temple. But the thought struck me, I'm like, well, I wonder how big the Serpent Mound is. And so you go to Google Earth and you can actually do a dot by dot tracing of the thing, and you find out that it's 50 acres. And then you find out that Damascus is actually not just the name of a city, but it's the name of an entire region. And guess how far down that region extends?
I'm guessing to the Serpent Mound.
To the Serpent Mound.
Yeah.
And so I'm making the argument that they actually knew about this, and they actually had a name for it. So hopefully that's what we're going to name the book, is Dragon of Damascus.
Oh, I like that.
Okay, so back to what it could possibly symbolize. Now, you have to understand that these ancient complexes were aligned to heavenly things. So if you want to go to that Avebury picture. Yeah. So this is actually Avebury Circle. Now, most people know about the kind of the ancient circle and the hill, the giant Silbury Hill, but what they don't know because most of it's no longer there. The right part of the kind of the neck of the what looks like a serpent that's still there. I forget what they call the walkway. And then there's a couple of two stones at the very end of the tail on the left side that are still there, but the rest of it's gone. But that thing actually made a giant serpent. And then the hill right below it, the Silbury Hill, if you put these layout with the Israel mound and wheel, and then that mound and I guess it's two mounds, but they're the same thing.
Wow.
And you don't just find it there. You find it over in Ohio. You find it in Seattle. You find this is a motif that's going all over the world. So, what?
Yeah, and the Avebury Dragon is in Wiltshire, England. Just for people listening that are not watching here. This is
and very ancient. I mean, we're talking 4,000 BC, 3,000 BC, something like that. So this is Stonehenge era stuff, which the same dating of Gilgal Rephaim, they date that 5 to 6,000 years ago.
What's happening with all this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want you to see in this picture is that when you look at the above it, that's the constellation Draco. Well, what are we talking about in this episode? We're talking about the dragon. Okay, so Draco is the biggest constellation in the northern hemisphere, and it just so happens to be right next to the North Pole. So if you were to take, there's a picture that I have where kind of all the stars are going around in a circle. You know that song that Journey sings of the wheel in the sky?
Yeah.
Keeps on spinning.
Keep on turning.
Right? So if you take a time-lapse picture of the North Star over the course of the night, that's what you get. And that's the wheel in the sky. And so you see that the North Star doesn't move, and so over the course of the night, it doesn't blur out. All the rest of the stars blur out because they're moving across the night sky. And so it creates this wheel. Now, if you can imagine that the North Star is on a pole, it's on a post, and everything is spinning around it like a merry-go-round, okay, or a top or something like that, now you understand, you're starting to get the idea of what Leviathan is doing in this more esoteric way of thinking about it as the tail eater. Okay, so Draco, because it's right on the edge of the North Star, it becomes the constellation that the ancient rabbis said moved the heavens. So it's overseeing the entire, so the night sky, it's overseeing the solar year, and it's overseeing the great year. And so this becomes a metaphor of a dragon that is it's turning all of time.
How does it work in the southern hemisphere? Does it?
It doesn't work in this way.
It only works in the
hemisphere.
north because you have the Southern Cross and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even know. I can't remember what the southern pole star is. I don't think that there really is one.
Sorry to our Aussie friends.
But yeah, too bad for them.
Yeah.
You got to come up north to see it.
I think one of the things that it's kind of hard to put into words, but over the years you kind of realize like modern people think that people who rebelled, ancient people who rebelled, didn't really have, they just opposed God. That's all they did.
Right.
So they just lived in sin and rebellion.
And they're just pure evil.
They're
right?
just pure evil. But what we uncover is there's actually a religion where they put the serpent on top and they worship him and they build stuff to him and they think he is God.
Yes.
And we uncover these clues. I mean, we're in Peru on our own trip, doing Blue Trip. There's serpents all over these ancient,
Same in India,
megaliths.
everywhere.
And
Mexico,
so,
everywhere. Yeah.
At the top of all the pantheon of gods is the serpent, basically. And no matter what god you're worshiping, ultimately on Earth, you're worshiping this. So then a lot of these discoveries make more sense. Symbolism makes more sense.
Exactly.
So we have to sort of understand that it's two empires competing.
Kingdoms, yeah.
Yes, and there's layers to how this is working. So you've got it on a literal level, maybe of an animal.
Yeah.
You've got it on a metaphorical level. You've got it on the level of an angelic being. You've got it on the level of what I call the heaven-earth mirror, the way that God literally created the physical universe and Earth's place in it. All of these are doing the same thing. They're teaching the same thing. And so, as a Christian, what I'm arguing is that the serpent worship, there's reasons why they did this.
Yeah.
You know, every culture knew that that northern constellation as the dragon.
So
it's embedded into the architecture of these sites. That's why that Avebury complex is patterned after Draco.
The constellation.
So what I'm arguing is that the Serpent Mound complex in Israel is doing the exact same thing, but it's doing it at a very different part of the world. It's doing it directly south of Mount Hermon,
right,
in the weirdest, most supernaturally charged place on planet Earth.
Yeah.
So now what that means for what I think is going on there. Now, there's one more piece to this, okay, before I can say that, which is that if you go back to that Isaiah passage, you find that it talks about, I'll read it again. It says, in that day, the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword. So that's kind of Michael language.
Right.
Will punish Leviathan. Now listen, Leviathan the fleeing serpent and Leviathan the twisting serpent. Now this isn't explicit in the text, but I can tell you that there were rabbis who said that there are two Leviathans in that passage, not one. One is Leviathan the twisting, or Leviathan the circular. The other is Leviathan the fleeing, or Leviathan, they called him the straight. Now, here's where that gets related to what we're talking about. So remember I said that if you imagine the North Pole being on a pole,
Right,
on a pole itself, everything is going around it. That becomes Leviathan the straight. Leviathan the crooked, or Leviathan the circular, is the Ouroboros. Now, if you there's two more pictures I really want to show. One is the map, the old map of the ancient world. Okay, so this is a map, I think, from, who's that from?
Homer.
Is it Homer?
Yeah, BC 1000.
That's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is basically his world. Okay, and they would all depict this. So that stuff in the middle is the Mediterranean Sea. So basically, you're getting a representation of Europe and then Turkey, Israel, and Africa, the north of Africa, and then Mediterranean goes around. But what you need to see is what's on the outside of it. They called it Oceanus, but it's actually depicted in ancient maps as Ouroboros.
So chaos.
Chaos. So yeah, because what lies, this works on multiple levels too. Like what lies beyond what's the known world? Chaos.
Right.
And they represented it as Oceanus. So he becomes this god of chaos, but he's depicted as a river, a cosmic river that goes around the earth. You know, this is where I think flat earth guys, they kind of don't understand what's actually going on symbolically. They're not saying that that's all there is of the earth. They're saying that what's beyond it is chaos, and that there's a god over it called Oceanus, and that it's represented by an ever-flowing circle of a serpent eating its tail.
It's very interesting.
Now, there's one other part of this, which is that has a heavenly counterpart in the Milky Way galaxy.
Let's go.
Okay,
Yeah.
So the Milky Way galaxy falls. When you look up in the sky, and most of us can't see it anymore because there's so much light pollution. But you can see that there's a really bright part of the galaxy, and that bright part of the galaxy has been known since. I mean, you can go back as far in time in any culture you want. They all say the same thing. It's the tail eater. It's Ouroboros because it looks like a serpent eating its tail.
In the sky.
In the sky.
Yeah.
So the Milky Way then becomes this kind of symbol in a similar way to what Draco is a symbol of as the Earth revolves around it. The Milky Way is a symbol of the same thing. Ouroboros, that is somehow the chaos beyond Earth that encircles the Earth. You always see the Milky Way in pictures. Obviously, you can't. It's a perspectival thing, right?
Yeah.
You can't draw the Milky Way as out there, but it's always pictured as enveloping the Earth as a circle. And so then they draw that literally as a fish eating its own tail, or a dragon eating its own tail, serpent eating its own tail, because they're the same thing. One's an earthly picture, the other one's a heavenly picture, and the two are mirroring one another because they're tethered together by this invisible pole at the North Star that's overseen by the constellation Draco. And so as in heaven, so on earth. those two things are supposed to be working in harmony together as the whole cycle of time goes around.
And that's a lot of what you hear from like Crowleyism and some of these occult things is like as above, below, et cetera. Right? This flipping of, that's what they say, right?
Yeah, so people know that phrase in a place they don't recognize it. Most people will identify it as some sort of a pagan idea. I think the Emerald Tablets of Thoth talk about that.
Billy Carson fabrication.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the fabrication. Billy Carson likes to think is real.
But the fact of the matter is Jesus taught us that too. He said we're supposed to pray as in heaven, so on earth.
Right.
Or as in heaven, so on earth. Thy will be done.
Yeah, on earth as it is in heaven.
Whose
right?
will? The Father's will.
Father's will.
Not the devil's will.
Right. But the perversion of that, of course, we talk about the inversion of the pentagram, the inversion of the creation story, the inversion of the gospel, which we'll see in Revelation with the Antichrist, is all the flipping of that, right? It's the kingdom, or nature of the empire of darkness, just taking the story and turning it upside down.
Well, I don't think we think that the ancients had a system. I think we just thought it was always chaos. It was just this chaotic ancient world, and there was only, this small group of people that were actually worshiping the true God. But I think that there was an organized religion that was just as deep, and I think it goes back to the serpent. I think the idea, Doug, do you believe that they thought the serpent was trying to free us?
Probably.
And we worship the serpent because the serpent's the good guy.
Right. That's exactly it. I mean, that's the way the story in the Bible is told from the very beginning.
Yeah.
He sets him out. He doesn't set himself up as a bad guy.
Yeah.
He sets himself up as the one who's going to free you.
Yeah.
The irony too is that a lot of times like the contemporary ideas around serpent effigies is that it just represents wisdom, which is very interesting too, because the biblical narrative would say that wisdom that's offered by the serpent is actually foolishness, right? It's the
they were supposed the true wisdom would be to eat from the tree of life.
Correct.
And then they refused to do that. They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is the tree of the law, effectively.
Right.
And they made a judicial decision to go against what God's word was, and they actually did become like gods. That was the ironic thing about it. So the gods are the ones who are supposed to make judicial decisions over God's creation and to govern it properly by obeying him. And in telling them to disobey God, they actually made a decision. It was just a wrong one.
The Elohim does in Deuteronomy 32, right? They are given governance over the nations, and they are corrupted.
Yeah.
So what about the physical part of this story? I know we're talking about kind of bigger like connections to the earth and the circumference and the wobble and all the things. But we do know that like creation was corrupted, and we do know there were chimerical creatures that seem to represent a lot of these gods and a lot of these fallen entities. Could the dragon have been some ancient chimera that existed at a point, and it was directly connected to?
I love that thought.
Well, same thing with like the bull, right? It's a golden calf. The bull is, as we talked about with Derek Gilbert, and we probably with you as well, when you at the base of Sinai, the golden calf is actually not a great translation. It's actually a bull, which is meant to represent El, right? The god of the Canaanites, right? Before he's deposed by Baal, which we sort of just already touched on.
Right.
But you have these animals that then are sort of co-opted by or representative of a lower G god.
Plenty of ancient evidence to suggest that these dragons were mixed up with dinosaurs and rebranded.
Have you heard this idea that a dinosaur? Well, I'm sure you've heard this. That a dinosaur, at least modern people think today that they were kind of reptilian and avian. They're like half bird, half reptile. So just if that's true, take that as a presupposition. Then go to your Old Testament and think about what that would be, biblically speaking. And what it would be is an unclean thing.
Right.
Because it's a mixing of kinds.
It's a mixture.
And so that's a Genesis 6 thing. And I actually think that you're exactly right about what, at the very least, a dinosaur represents, if not it actually being a literal chimera that was created by whatever, and that it actually became then a personification of all these other things in the physical realm.
Yeah, because, I mean, and we know, like, there was story of flying serpents, and Moses dealt with them.
Yeah.
But they're not around anymore.
Yeah.
Or at least...
I think Herodotus actually talks about those flying serpents, that he had heard about them in Egypt or whatever as well. So it's not just the Bible that talks about that.
That's wild.
But people will there's modern stories of people seeing these things flying around still. Like they come out at night, they have bioluminescent, they're flying around these villages, and like we asked a guy that was a missionary in Papua New Guinea about that. But I've heard those stories, and there's lots of ancient History Channel shows where they go to these parts
Right.
and they still see these flying serpent like dragon things, but from our perspective, I mean, you look at the wild stuff in the mud fossil world, which a lot of people like will see these mud fossils, these ancient dragons, and there's that one that's really compelling, Doug. I mean, it's massive. It's this cave, and it looks like an eyeball.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it looks
You're
like
talking about the serpent cave in Asia, right? Like it looks like a snake head. You're talking about that one?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah.
Well, there's that one, but this one is a massive.
Yeah.
It's like two guys in front of this perfectly. It looks like a petrified eyeball.
Yeah.
And people say it's the
You can
eye
go
of a dragon.
inside of this thing.
Yeah, I think it's called the Eye of the Dragon or something.
It,
like
it might be in Spain or something like that. I think I've seen the video
Yeah.
for this thing.
Maybe Dan can pull it up.
That was like a lesser known Survivor song than
but
Eye of the Tiger.
it's massive, right? So if this thing was an actual creature,
Yeah, it's absolutely
it would be
gigantic.
like Smog,
Yeah,
but even
absolutely.
bigger from The Hobbit. But there it is. So some people think this is the actual like fossilized dragon eye, and they call it the dragon eye. What do you know? But I mean, which could be some sort of. I tend to think that these creatures could have been created like with Watcher tech and then possessed of some kind, and so then they become more than just a symbol. They were actually a thing at one point. But that's the more bizarre physical side of these things.
Yeah.
Because I think that we have modern stories of like the natives saw these creatures for a long time. They knew it was part of it, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, they do exist. They do exist. So I don't know. What is the connection there? Do you think they were cooking up some of their own mascots? Luke likes sports. What's your favorite mascot, Luke?
Is it the dragons, Luke? Do you like the dragons
that's
as your
that's
favorite?
a hard one. Probably the Fighting Irish, being Irish
The
myself.
Kraken.
I'm not a big Notre Dame
The Seattle
fan.
Kraken.
The Kraken's a good one, actually. There's the Yetis. I mean, we have to kind of go with the home team, Nate.
But you have these mascots. I think that, and then they could worship them. Sort of corrupted all kinds of parts of creation. I just trying to figure out how your brain works in those spaces.
Yeah, so the main thing to me to think about that I wanted to add to the Leviathan part is that that's both heaven and earth. It's both visible and invisible, and that those are connected to each other, and that's the way that the universe was designed by God.
Yeah.
And so whether you're dealing on any of those kind of 4 or 5 levels of what Leviathan is, they're all related to each other. Symbolically, they're just saying the exact same thing.
This might be a generic question, but is the dragon and the serpent the same?
That's what we said in Revelation, yeah.
In the ancient eyes?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's kind of a yes and no.
Yeah. Because if you see ancient depiction of like a dragon flying through the sky,
Right.
It kind of looks like a snake,
Right.
slithering. Like, let's go back to our never-ending story. Let's watch.
Yeah, so whether you're
the luck dragon
whether you're dealing with a
flying through the
dragon myth or you're dealing with
Yeah.
a serpent worship where it's an Indian rock carving picture, petroglyph or whatever, and it's just a snake. Same. It's still the same symbolism.
Yeah, I mean, in Chinese culture, obviously the dragon is massive, and you see those kites they fly, and they look like snakes in the air, and you wonder if the serpent and the dragon in the ancient eyes was the same creature.
I mean, I think that's kind of what John is trying to get us to see, and that it's not just that they're the same creature, but that there's some sort of supernatural evil that's attached to the meaning of it.
One thing that's interesting too is that like when you go back to Job 40 and 41. The idea of behemoth is in this verse is fascinating. It's that look at behemoth which I made along with you, right? So it almost sounds like this is a creation of God. The behemoth is right. It's whatever that ends up being based upon the description. It is what it is. But then that's not what it says about Leviathan.
It doesn't say that.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
The word God's word here is not that I created Leviathan in the same way I created you. It's that, like it just is talking about this beast that can't swords and harpoons and clubs and these things do nothing. It stirs up the deep. It It has,
And it always has to be defeated.
yeah.
It's always bringing chaos. It's always being sliced up by God whenever he's mentioned. But I don't think Behemoth is that way. I think Behemoth only really appears in that verse.
But I think it's interesting, right? Is that to this conversation, like we have God in Job 40 saying, "I created this behemoth alongside of you," and there's none of that exists in the Leviathan description. Which, take it however you want it. Is it the dragon of old? Yes. Is it also could it potentially be some chimerical or something like the giants that was a hybridization of angel DNA or the mixture, as you said? I think all those things remain on the table because I think it's pretty evident that God doesn't say the same thing about this creature. He talks about the sort of the massiveness, the scariness, the pieces of this beast that are magnificent and scary, but it doesn't say I made that as well. It seems to be a different creature, if you will,
that's
which is
interesting.
interesting.
Because God certainly made Lucifer,
Yeah.
but is that thing that represents him? Yeah, I don't know.
Because I think sometimes we create narratives and we strive for connection to God because there is this separation between heaven and earth. And so we don't get to walk in the garden with God anymore. And Satan seems to be, does his desire to be worshiped the same and in the same fashion, you think?
Well, I don't think it was created in him.
Yeah.
I tend to think that the Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 passages that are about this
King of Tyre.
They seem to be this going back to Eden, and I'm of the view that it's actually talking about this creature. So I do think, like, ancient Jews believe that the fall of Satan took place in the garden when God made Adam and Eve, and he became jealous of what God gave to us that he didn't give to him. But I'm open to the possibility that that's just kind of like one fall of him, and that maybe he had some sort of other fall that was before that. I mean, you're dealing with a creature who knows when God created him. I have absolutely no idea. How old is he?
Right.
And what was he doing? If God created him good, there had to have been some point of time, maybe a long time, where he was doing what he's supposed to do.
Well, the Bible says serpent of old. The idea is that it's at least implied or implicit that there's this ancient thing, perhaps. And we've kind of talked about this too, Doug, with like I think Timothy Alberino, for example, about sort of this idea of prehistory. Like, was there, this war that we're born into? Does it predate us? It seems like that.
Right.
That's the idea of creation and the Hebrew used around the earth being formless and without void. It would sort of you can interpret this to be that it was destroyed or under destruction, and there's this battle that predates all of that, which I think is all interesting things to think about. Now,
that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's possible, but I'm not going to die on that hill.
Salvation issue. We had this earlier when we were at breakfast, but it's like, it does provide a lot of context when you realize that, like,
at some point in time, if the Isaiah thing is really talking about this creature, it doesn't have man in there other than, it says that he desires to set himself above the stars of God. So it's kind of like they're the only ones there.
It's like the Elohim. Yeah.
And he's trying to usurp them all and become top dog. So then he's brought low, which is what happens in Eden. He's brought low.
I mean, regardless of how you think about it, I just think that it's fascinating. They're all building the same structures with the same symbolism all over the world.
That's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
Unless it's coordinated.
Yes.
Or it comes from the same root, either way.
Yeah. Like everyone's sort of screwed up creation story goes back to their serpent.
And it's always going back to the serpent. Yeah. And that's exactly what the Bible does too. It always goes back to the serpent.
And then to Leviathan, Doug, which is interesting, is that, like, it's pretty specific in Job there that, like, that swords, harpoons, spears, clubs don't work. It's like so the work of man can't defeat this. Right? And then you go and jump ahead to Revelation 9 and 20, and we see that who can defeat?
Well, even in Job, that's kind of the point, like, because that's the ultimate thing that God created. And so the only one who is over Leviathan is God himself.
Right.
Right. And so then you have that prophecy in Isaiah that somehow the Lord with his strong sword is going to defeat Leviathan. Yes. And then you have Michael and the dragon coming into that as the ultimate telling of that story, that it's not Thor, and it's not Zeus, and it's not Baal.
Right.
Probably all the same entity. I don't know. It's because that's the ironic thing about it, right? If like this is, let that sink in for a minute. If the storm god is Satan, which we've made that argument,
Right.
and he's defeating Leviathan, like that's a picture of him. What's he defeating himself?
Right.
Is he trying to become that thing which he defeated? Like that, it's so weird to just wrap your mind around it. And the biblical story of that is that no, it's always the Lord who's the uncreated one, who's the only one who's over Leviathan. He's the only one that can tame the thing. He's the only one that can destroy the thing. Whether he's represented, sometimes Leviathan is actually represented as Pharaoh. A couple of the Psalms are talking about that. It seems to me very explicitly. He's mentioned in Job, which I think predates the Exodus.
Yep.
But the Psalm doesn't. And the whole context of that is the Exodus. So even there, whether you're a human king who's acting like Leviathan, God's the only one who's going to defeat him.
I think what's interesting, the Michael thing too, is that we did an episode with you on Melchizedek, and it connected.
Yeah.
I said it right now. I know. Which connected him to Angel of the Lord, to Michael, and then if we have Michael defeating the dragon, then we can draw at least a conclusion, if we like, that perhaps that is also Jesus.
I think so.
That's the argument we or
Exactly.
sort of the
That's a logical
the thesis,
entailment, and it's also the only thing that the Bible tells us about who can defeat it.
This might be like way too wild, but
Oh, boy.
so I mean, if the chaos dragon's hanging in the waters, right? God creates human beings, knowing that humans will ultimately destroy the dragon. So is there a point? Because we always wonder, why are we here? What are we doing? What's the point of humanity? But it's like we are the sort of the hobbit that's going to see, oh, there's a hole in Smaug's armor, and it's going to be that this specific creature that's going to be created and can see. So maybe even with, could that have been a motivation of why Satan came to the garden? Because he knew humanity's going to kill me.
I mean, that was the promise. I don't know if he knew that promise ahead of time or not, right? But that was the promise,
Genesis
that
3.
the woman's seed would crush his head.
Yeah. And
everything cascades out of that.
Like,
Everything. The whole Bible is a commentary on Genesis 1 through 3.
humanity kills the dragon through Jesus,
Right.
who is a son of man.
Exactly.
And so it's this weird thing, but the story involves sort of the most unlikely of creature to actually take down the dragon would be a human being.
I love that, man. I mean, that's got to be exactly what Tolkien's got in his mind when he's writing that story.
What I love about this too, Doug, is it reminds me of in some ways of like how Jesus speaks in parables, right? You have within the sort of very practical reading of the scriptures, there's so much nuanced meaning the deeper you want to go, whether it be the prodigal son, whether it be the tares, whatever it is Jesus is speaking about. We also see these things in the Old Testament, these stories that are multi-layered, multi-meaning. Scripture has, you can talk about perhaps it being a physical creature, perhaps that's that, but also at the same time, we've just laid out a case for it being the dragon, Satan, the serpent, and all those
the
things.
Cosmos, the stars, the way that the earth has been created to have seasons.
And the brilliance of the Word of God is not lost on me. That like within the pages of this Bible of 66 books, multitude of different authors, a coherent story, as you said, from Genesis 3 on, of God having a family and then getting his family back, right? That was the easiest way to describe it. That within that, we can unwrap some of these mysteries, as it says in the Word, is the glory of God to conceal a thing and the glory of kings to seek it out, right? And I love that, because I think that's what makes the Word of God living and true, is you can revisit these stories, revisit the words of Jesus, and there's more meaning within these things. There's deeper meanings, like an onion. You can peel it back and be like, this also applies to this. The prodigal son applies to me. The prodigal son applies to humanity. And you go, this is just, it's brilliance. And I think that's the way that God likes to communicate, is these stories within stories that reveal more and more about not only our human history, but who he is, most importantly.
Yeah.
I find it so much more interesting than just saying, oh, well, Leviathan is a dragon, or no,
Yes.
he's not.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, and I think too, it's like a lot of the existential questions people have, like, why would God create humanity and leave this doorway for us to be corrupted? And like maybe part of the corruption was the ultimate goal to just destroy the dragon ultimately, and in the end there was always sort of this, I'm going to lure you in, bait you, but your own, temptation is going to be your end, And I think that
was the design of free will, right? I think God knew this was going to happen, but ultimately love requires choosing and free will. And so for us to love God as his children, and the same thing I believe with the angels, I mean, there's free will there. Obviously they rebelled. You had to choose. And I think God knew that was going to happen. But within the brilliance of that, he takes that aspect of falling away, of the rebellion, which is the other side of free will, from choosing to love him, and he uses that unto his glory and to the end to bring us all back. That's our hope of our salvation, right? I mean, I think it's beautiful.
And we say, we have our yard sign, DNA wars are happening. And I think that clearly there was some sort of rebellion before we got here. And then a big part of the goal was to breed us out, DNA change, get humanity at its core is the problem. We need to get rid of these things. And I think that you can kind of see this enveloped in this all throughout the stories, that there was so much more going on before and after. And but I think that modern Christians we have a hard time giving any kind of power to another deity or lesser deity. We don't factor that into the story. So a lot of these things just are confusing. Why are the ancients building serpent mounds and making these crazy pyramids and things? Like, they must have been deceived. It's like, well, they probably knew more than we do about the cosmos, about the sort of spiritual language and the spiritual laws and things. And you can learn something from them too.
Yeah, I think that their deception, it works on a much more complicated level.
Yeah.
It's a lot like the temptation with Eve. I don't think it's as simple as what we want to make it to be.
Right.
That temptation was incredibly cunning, and we don't give Satan credit for how cunning it was. And I think the same thing here. So they think by looking at the stars, which are always the same, and then by going to making a temple complex that's somehow patterned after the order of creation, and then putting the symbol of the serpent in there, that they're actually worshiping order instead of chaos. And that's the subversion of the scripture, is that it's telling you that Satan, who is offering you all these incredible things, the temptations that he offered to Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Those are real temptations that Jesus had to have felt, or else they would be meaningless.
Right.
Sure.
And what seems like good and order and wonderful is, at the end of the day, chaotic. And man, I just find it there's no end in my mind to the fact that the Greeks is kind of come full Ouroboros on us.
Yeah, right.
That their God, the ultimate God, is chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a crazy thing. And, to me, it reminds me a lot of like the secular counterpart that we've been living with for the past 300 years with the Big Bang. What is that? That's just chaos, and that's the ultimate order. That somehow chaos brings order out of nothing it's an absurd idea.
Yeah.
And biblically speaking, I think the Bible is trying to point us to that these things that entice you, the things that are driving our world completely insane, morally speaking, at every possible level, politically speaking, and all of our institutions, they're just disintegrating before our eyes. We think that that's order, but it's not. It's chaotic.
Yeah.
And it's at the end of the day that means that what's going on is the worship of the dragon.
Yeah. So one of my last questions, Doug, then, I mean, I think the temptation of Christ is very unique, and that it's a very snapshot of Satan trying to lure Jesus away from his Father, and actually, trying to build even a bigger army down here. Satan seems to be limited down here of what he can and can't do. Right? Like, if humans have sort of divine access to this world, this realm, it seems like, Satan is all pride, and we know that he is. Why isn't he walking around right now And is he using some of these creatures to kind of gain access to certain parts of our world that he can't get to? And ultimately, Satan's going to need a human to take control of the whole world. He still needs a human being to do, just like Jesus became human to...
Yeah, kind of the Antichrist
Yes,
idea, right?
the Antichrist is like the dragon can't just come out of the mountain and reign over the world yet. It's sort of limited to maybe he's prisoned in the waters. Is there some sort of connection of like he's here, but he can't go everywhere?
Right. There's no doubt. I mean, I've argued before that he's bound until he's released.
Yeah.
And that binding is so that he can't deceive the nations, but not so he can't do anything.
Yeah.
But he's very clearly, he doesn't have that kind of power that he used to. But at some point in time, he will.
Yeah.
Because he's released.
Yeah.
So yeah, how does he orchestrate his kingdom today? He has to do it by proxies because he's under house arrest.
Yeah, and I think that's how you can make some sense of some of these wild stories where he's projecting into Judas. And
it's probably all kinds of ways that he's doing it. Yeah,
serpents. I mean, and it's like this strange kind of mixture of all the things we talk about, where it's sort of physical, but it's not physical, but it's kind of spiritual, but not really. But it seems as though he's going to need a human being to fully take over. And I think that if you look at this ancient serpent worship, that's what he wants, ultimately. He wants to be God. He thinks he's better than God. And I think that the ancients had this idea that he was. And that's why they were building all this stuff. And just like we build these monumental, incredible churches, they were making their ancient churches. And
that's exactly what they were.
Yeah.
To the serpent. They were serpent complexes.
And so what's your final thoughts on Leviathan? Any final thoughts, Doug?
About the snag.
That he's chaos.
It's chaos.
That's the number one thing. But that chaos isn't just a metaphor, but that it's working on a physical level. It's working on a spiritual level. It's working on an interdimensional level. It's working on a level of heaven and earth being connected. It's working on a astronomical level. And so Leviathan is not just this, it's not just a creature, it's actually a whole bunch of creatures that are working in tandem in fallen ways. And that ultimately speaking, the only hope that you have over the chaos monster is you're either going to worship it or you're going to worship the one who defeats it. And the only one who has the power to defeat the Leviathan is Michael, is Christ himself. And in fact, he has defeated him. At the cross, he has no legal authority over anyone anymore. And that's the good news. And someday he's coming again soon to judge the living and the dead. And people better be ready for it. Because he's the King of Kings.
That's right.
And if he can defeat the Leviathan, he has all power over all things. But, you know, the way he defeated him is what's so cool, is that he defeats him at the cross.
Yeah.
He doesn't defeat him by, shooting an arrow through his heart. He defeats him by dying himself on the cross so that we can have forgiveness for the fact that we might worship the serpent.
So he slays the beast of pride.
Through ultimate humility. Instead of sacrificing the devil, it's a self-sacrifice.
Yes.
It's the opposite of what we think warfare is.
It's humiliating. I'm saying the most humiliating way.
Yeah.
Right? In the opposite of pride. Christ strives in a humiliating, humble, like horrific way, which was reserved for the worst of the worst, and he uses that to defeat the agent of pride, which is incredible. It's funny. I was thinking about this. It's like Jurassic Park, right? Chaos theory. We're talking about chaos theory. Dr. Ian Malcolm, right?
Yeah.
So God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs.
That's exactly it, man.
1993. No, thanks, Doug. This is I love doing these things. It's so good to have you in person.
Yeah, tell our listeners where they can.
And also about your pod. You've got 2 podcasts where they can find what you're working on. I know I'll let you talk about them, but I know what they are. I'm not gonna steal your
Giant
thunder.
Steps is kind of on hiatus.
Okay.
It has been for 6 months.
I have the shirt. I still wear the shirt, probably.
I know. We've been super busy. Rudy just moved. We are going to pick it up again for like season 2 at some point in time.
Yeah.
The other podcast I'm doing is called The Reform Fringe. We recently rebranded that with a pastor here in town in Spring Hill, John Moffat.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that for, I suppose, 14 months or something.
Okay.
And that's going well. We actually started a platform for kind of people that have been listening to you guys, but are also kind of more in my space, the reform world.
Space,
like
yeah.
there's no place that people can go that, it's especially a pastoral concern of ours, because we have people that are in our churches that they feel like they can't talk to anybody about this stuff.
Right.
And so we've created a space called the Reform Fringe. It's reformfringe.com that people can come and be around people that are thinking a lot of the same things, but are kind of doing it from a reform-friendly perspective, we say.
But that's how I always think you're always a unicorn, Doug. When I love you immensely.
I am. It's a very unicorn.
Yeah, because being in the reform space, but
which
you
we're
are
real, and we're roaming at one point. In history.
But you've written an amazing book about giants. If you haven't picked up Doug's book on giants, pick it up. You talk about the supernatural thing. So you are, I think, a beacon in that place of Christendom, because you're very much open to the supernatural things in a space where that's hard for a lot of folks in Reformed theology.
It's very hard. It's very hard for people to get, and we get a lot of flack for what we do, but I don't care at this point in time.
Fight the good fight.
I love it, Doug. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
And I think, for our show, over the history of our show, it helps people kind of understand these stories, especially ones that they've read in Genesis, where it's like, okay, why do they use the analogy of striking the heel? That sounds like an actual snake.
A snake.
Right? But we're still afraid of those things to this day. But also the snake can be connected to these other things. And there's also this whole other spiritual world that can kind of, you could read a story in Genesis with three different glasses. And sometimes you can put them into like 3D vision, right? And actually see it and make more sense, which is very 80s. And how we like to do it here is sort of 3D vision.
So you put on your snake glasses.
Yeah. Still a little blurry, but it's giving you some depth, more depth of the 3D glasses really.
If you had glasses that had like a serpent on the side piece and then kind of serpent over, and you had one of those things that hang in the back there, it would be
like
it would be like Ouroboros.
All right, we'll get 10%.
If Serpent
Doug.
sunglasses comes out, you invented that, not us. But thanks, Doug. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for having these conversations.
And if you're listening, you can see Doug at BlurryCon 3. Doug will be here back here in Franklin, Tennessee with us.
That's right. Still got a few tickets.
Thanks you guys, so much for what you're doing in the space that you're at. And God's, talking with Luke a little bit earlier, just the place that God has put you in. It's very unique. It's challenging, I know. And as you guys grow, it more challenging. Just encourage you to, stay faithful. And I believe that you will, which is why I put as much as I can behind what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Doug.
And I appreciate what you're doing immensely.
Thank you.
Same.
Well, you have to sign the Blurry Studio, sign the wall, and we'll see you in the fall.